I'm the APQS dealer here at Quilt Country, and today I'm going to show you how to load the machine with a leader, with your fabric to get ready to quilt your quilt like I do it, which is way easy. We're just going to use a small piece of fabric just so that you can see what I'm doing and how I do it. So the first thing we want to do is anytime you are quilting a quilt for someone, you want to try to get them to work on the length of your fabric as opposed to the width, unless it's directional, so that you are doing as much as you can in one swipe across the fabric or across the quilt as you can. So we want to load our quilt, our back, with the right side down. See, the wrong side's up. And we're going to load it right straight to our selvage to the edge of the leader. And when we pin this, you also, if you have one of these, a little wrist pin cushion, that's pretty handy. When you pin this, you want to pin right into the corner. Having those corners pinned is very important. And you're basically going to pin in a straight line, end to end. And you're going to pin all the way across. It's important to pin closely, not too close, but close enough so that when you put tension on the back of your back, from this side to that side, you don't get a scalloped edge and you don't warp the way that your back looks. So I'm just going to continue pinning, and they're not on top of each other. There's maybe a ½ inch to an inch in between. I don't like pins very much, so we just want to get it on there so that we're holding it. And as I'm pulling this across, I am not pulling my back, I'm not stretching it. I'm just laying it in the position that I want. Okay. So after you're done pinning, you want to go ahead and flip it down and make sure your leaders are straight all the way across, because you don't want to pull it too hard the other way and take a chance in ripping it. Okay, now once I have my leader all the way across, it's going under the leveler bar. This bar and this bar keep your back level. We're going to pull it across the top here, and we're going to let it advance forward. Now, the advantage to doing it like this, if you have a really large piece of fabric, you know that sometimes, even if you fold it in half, what's the center part of your selvage on this side and the center part of your selvage on this side are not always going to be the same. So by doing it like this and by allowing the fabric to feed itself across, we're going to let our back find its own happy little spot and its own center. Okay. As you can see, I'm using the foot control at this point. If this were a big back, I would use the motor on the side, and I would be walking up and down trying to keep this straight. I'm not so concerned that back here is straight. I want it to not have too many bulges or kinks in it. But the main thing I'm concerned about is just letting this part find its own center. At this point, I come to the center of my fabric, and I'm just eyeballing it. I haven't measured anything. And now I'm going to pin from the center to the right and from the center to the left. And this is going to keep me from shifting my fabric too much one direction or another. And again, I'm pinning my selvage edge to my leader edge. I'm not stretching it. I just want it right to the edge. And again, I want to pin my corners down. You want those corners secure. So I'm just going to keep pinning. You can cut, I guess. At this point, I am done with my pins. You can take your pin cushion off. And now I want to roll this side of my leader over, because what I want to do here is I want to keep advancing it forward. And I want to get my back tight. And I want to start it tight from this side. See how it's all tight right here? And I'm never going to pull my back so tight that you can bounce a quarter off of it. You just want it tight enough so that you don't get any bunching or puckers or anything like that. Now I'm going to reverse it, and I have to turn this bar the whole time I'm doing it. And as I'm working it, I'm just making sure this side is flat. It is so important that this side now be as flat and as straight as possible. I'm going to keep letting it go. And I'm going to let this roll till my top side gets to the center, so that as I am getting ready to pin my back on and do my work, I'm not working way back here killing my back. I'm doing everything right here where it's easy for me to reach. Now, if this were a large back, you would be walking up and down the entire width of your leader to make sure everything was straight. And at this point now, I have to tighten my tension bar. So I'm going to tighten my tension block down and make sure it's where I want. Now, if my tension block isn't holding it tight enough, there's a piece right down here where you just adjust it. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Set it like you want it, push it down. And now you can see everything is nice and tight and nice and secure. And you want Now I'm ready to apply or put my batting onto my top, and I have my top here and I'm putting my batting on my back, excuse me. So I'm going to just lay my batting, line it up across the top. When you're putting your batting on, you do want your batting to be at least as wide as your back. The reason is because you're going to have some shifting and some turning, and you've got to be able to have you need as much batting as you need to make it fit underneath your quilt. And every quilt has its own story. Every quilt is not going to fit exactly on the same size that the top is. So have enough batting on there. That's important. Now I want to secure my batting to my back. So all right. This is the front of the machine. What we need to know here is how to turn it on, how to set our speeds, how to get ready to start quilting. So as you can see, it tells you the number of stitches or your speed, but it's actually number of stitches per inch. And we want to go to the right hand side, and we're going to hit the clutch and the green button, and we're going to turn it up to 11, 12, 13, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to stop at 12. And you hit the clutch and the green button at the same time and hold it till it gets to the speed you want. If you have gone too far, you're going to hit the clutch again, and the clutch is right here on the handle. You're going to hit the clutch and the red to slow it down. So we want it right at 12, and I'm going to leave it right there. Now, everything else that I'm going to do is actually right here. Your little cheat sheet is right here on the front. If I'm going to use my locks, this cheat sheet goes to this handle, this one goes to this handle, so each one is separate. We are mostly going to use the horizontal lock, and this little arrow tells you that you can't go that way, is what that means. So I wrote an H on my machine so that I would remember that that's a horizontal lock, not a vertical lock. And the vertical lock actually has the horizontal arrow on it. That's vertical. It means it's not going to go horizontally. So if you'll just note your machine that way, then it'll be easier for you to remember. Okay, now we're going to secure our batting down again. And I've laid my batting on my back. And I've used two different colors of thread so that you can see the difference between what we're doing. And I went ahead and used black so there'd be high contrast. I am going to hit my clutch, and on the right hand side with the controls I can see needle up, needle down. So I'm going to hit clutch yellow and go needle down, clutch yellow, needle up, and I'm going to pull my bottom thread through to the top. I'm going to secure that with a stitch or two just so that I don't have to hang on to it. And it's really, really important that you snip these threads. You do not want long threads hanging down, getting caught in your wheels, and causing you trouble. Now, I want to secure this on here, so I'm going to draw a straight line all the way across. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to hit clutch in yellow. That's my horizontal lock. On the right-hand side, left-hand side, I'm going to hit clutch green to set my stitch regulator. That's the beeping that you hear. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to hit clutch blue, and that engages the machine. And when I do it, hit any button to turn it off. When I do that, you just have to guide it across. The lock is going to keep it right where it needs to be, and you're just guiding it with a finger. You can shove it out of your horizontal lock if you're not careful. So just guide it just like I was with one finger is all that you need. Now we need to attach the top, and we're going to use this cute little quilt. And that horizontal line that we just drew there was a visual for us so that we would know where to lay the border on the backing and the batting to get ourselves a straight line. So I'm going to raise my needle up again, clutch yellow on the right, and then clutch yellow on the left. I'm going to disengage that lock so that I can pull it over and readjust it. Now, the line that I'm making right here, and I'm hitting my clutch yellow over and over again to make sure that I like exactly where I'm sewing. This line that I'm making right here, I want it to stay inside the 1/4 inch that your binding is going to hide it, okay? And what we want to do here is we just want to get our top down. So, I'm going to put my handles back in position, clutch green on the left, clutch yellow on the left because I want to set my new locked position, clutch blue on the right. And the whole time I just hit it and take my hands away. And again, I'm moving it across. Now, if your quilt, your hopping foot, acts like a presser foot, it's literally going to shift your fabric as you're going across it. So you may have to adjust it up or down using your fingernails to keep it in that 1/4 inch area that we want. Okay? And you want to be careful not to pull or stretch your border, because I promise you it already has enough funky stuff going on. And you want to be careful not to sew your finger to your quilt, but if you do, remember your saliva will get your blood out of that quilt. Okay, so there I've set my stitch all the way across the top. With that in mind, now I'm going to undo my horizontal lock, clutch yellow on the left, and now I want to advance my quilt up so that I can start working, getting my workspace ready. So now I need to advance it, and I can do it right here with my foot pedal on this little one. Now when I advance my quilt, I do not necessarily have to release my tension brake. That tension brake should never be so tight that you would strip out your motor as you're advancing or bringing your quilt back. So right here I have everything nice and flat. Now with my stitch regulator again, I'm just going to come down both sides. Now I'm not going to set my vertical lock because the vertical lock, the straight on this machine, is probably going to be a lot different than the straight edge of your quilt top. So, and the way this machine rides on the carriage, it really wants to just go nice and straight. So I'm just going to set my stitch regulator, going to turn my machine on, so that was clutch green on the left, clutch blue on the right, and I'm going to guide this machine all the way down. And if you'll notice, I'm pressing down a little bit because my hopping foot is shifting my fabric forward. So I'm just giving it a little tug to the back so that it doesn't push it too far forward. Once I've done that side, I'm going to pull my thread up again, just with one touch of the clutch yellow. Do that twice. And also, anytime you're in stitch regulated, any button will release the stitch regulator. Just the button, not the clutch. So here I've done my clutch yellow twice again. I've pulled my thread up. I'm going to stitch a couple times just to secure it down. Trim that thread. You don't want those long threads everywhere. And again, I'm going to turn on my regulator, my machine. And I'm just going to hold it down where it wants to be. Now, whether you're doing a quilt for yourself or for a customer, that is a very nice thing to do because it holds it down well enough so that when your customer goes to bind the quilt, it's not all gathering up and bunching on them. Now, pretend we've quilted this whole top. Every time I want to advance my quilt, as long as my needle is down, I'm just going to let it advance because it's going to ride with the quilt. The thing you have to remember is the spacing that you have right here. Your machine's only going to go so far because it's hitting the very, very back. Okay? Has nothing to do with what is happening up front. It's going to hit that back bar. So you can use your hand as a guide too to know how far you need to advance your quilt to be able to come down and finish off the bottom. Because the point I'm trying to make here is when you get to the bottom of your quilt, before you do that very, very last row, you want to make sure everything is laying nice and straight. And this is a little quilt, so we're not going to have much problem. But if this were a large quilt, this would probably be a little bit wavy. So we want to come to about the center of the quilt. And we're going to pull our bottom thread up again. And whoops, this time I just want to clutch yellow, needle up, needle down, needle up, needle down. And by doing this, I'm going to secure the bottom of my quilt down. And also, if I have any fullness that needs to be worked in, I'm going to work it into those basting stitches just like you would if you were setting a sleeve into a garment. You have to baste that fullness in so that it'll all work in where you want it to be. And then once I've basted it all the way across the bottom, if I can see I'm running nice and straight, I'll just turn on my stitch regulator again in my machine. And as you can see, I was manipulating my fabric just a little bit to work in that fullness. So watch as I work it in. Notice how I pressed down on it to get all that fullness in. Now I can see on this side I'm running really nice and flat. So I'm just going to keep on going. And all the way up the side. A couple of important things to remember is every time you're done using your scissors, put them up out of the way. If you run over your scissors, you're in trouble. So get in the habit of putting that up. Get in the habit of clipping those threads. Get in the habit of using your trash can. And then pretty much you're quilting as you've gone, but what I wanted to show you was how to load the back of your back, how to load your top, and how to work yourself all the way around the edge. And then as you begin, when you start, you want to try to start in a corner where you can bury those threads. So I'm just going to start a spot real quick for you. Again, I'm pulling my threads through. And I'm always pulling my threads through and clip into the top because every time you use your thread cutter, although it's a marvelous invention, it's only cutting the back. So it leaves an 1.5 inch tail on the back that you're going to have to come to and find later. So if you'll just pull it up to the top, you're ready to start. So here I am in the corner where I can bury my stitches. I'm going to turn on my stitch regulator, my machine, and I'm just going to start sewing. And you just keep going until your bobbin runs out. So, that's it. Oh, so anyway, this is a very simple way to finish off, or to get your quilt loaded. It's a simple way because you don't do a lot of measuring, but everything is found at its own center. When you have a larger quilt, as you become more familiar with your machine, we'll talk about how you measure, how you keep it square, even though you're not working from the center of your machine like some people tell you to do. One thing I do know about how I like to quilt is I want to quilt for people who are going to be using their quilts. I don't necessarily love doing shows or anything like that. So I'm quilting for utility as well as beauty, and you can come into the shop and see any of the quilts that I've done. They all lay flat, they all look nice, but it's way simpler to do it this way than any other method that I know of. So, thank you. Yes. Okay, your machine comes with these clamps to hold your sides, because you've got to hold your tension throughout the center of your quilt as you're working on it so that you don't get the puckers in between. So most machines come with 2 of these clamps that you're supposed to clamp on to the quilt on the side. That's nice. However, you get something that's pretty loose and you're going to get a funny scallop in the center or any other kind of problem. So what Chrissy and I found is this, or Chrissy actually found these. It's a PVC clamp that actually clamps onto the fabric and the batting. We like to catch both. And you just pop it in. And then you've got this piece of elastic right here that you only clamp one of your clamps into. And what it does is it holds an even tension across 12 inches or 15 inches of your quilt, which is very, very nice. And you're going to do that on both sides. Then we have just a regular yardstick that you put underneath it, because these clamps and this clamp together gets pretty heavy. So you want to put that underneath so that as you move your machine around, you don't get hung up in it on your machine. So having those on there will help keep your tension nice and tight across the back, again without stretching it so tight that you can pop a quarter off of it. One of the things you want to remember about tension on the back of your quilt is that when the quilt is laying on the bed, it's not being pulled so tight that it's just loose, it's there, it's relaxed. So that's kind of how you want to quilt your quilts too. You want to relax them a little bit, but you want enough tension on the back to not have any puckers or tucks in it. So thank you. I hope this helps. You can call anytime if you need any help. That's it. I can't even remember what I said.